In this Nioh 3 build guide, we're going to be taking a look at my personal first playthrough build, the Split-Glaive Arcanist, using a combination of the Switch Glaive and Splitstaff to shred enemies with fast-paced attacks, combos, and heavy-hitting magic spells. I'll be showing you where to place your stats and skills to get the maximum impact from this build, as well as what equipment to use and which guardian spirits and soul cores to have. As this is a full playthrough build, I'll be telling you exactly what you should be looking out for both in the early game and late game in order to continue using this build as you make your way through the game. The core of the Split-Glaive Arcanist build is using the Switch Glaive and Splitstaff in tandem with each other along with magic, giving you adaptability in a wide array of combat situations. The Switch Glaive is my personal favorite weapon in the game, with its stance system having the most diversity of any weapon, and its combo potential having a very high skill ceiling. Pairing this with a Splitstaff for bonus mobility and key damage, as well as magic for ranged options, makes this build an all-around unstoppable force in the right hands. With the Switch Glaive, you'll be looking to take advantage of its special stance swapping skills, which add an attack when you swap stances mid-combo, and the wind skill Cyclone. Playing around with long combo strings on the Switch Glaive is the bulk of the damage in this build, as you can get huge uses out of the arts meter by learning how to do so. The primary element of the Switch Glaive will be wind, looking to bluster enemies and increase the key damage dealt to them. The Splitstaff's purpose is mostly for depleting key meters, as you do great key damage when you get in attacks from behind. The absolute best use we get out of the Splitstaff is versus large yokai bosses with a purple key bar. Getting behind these bosses is typically easier, and absolutely shreds their key as they don't stagger away from you when you hit them. Once you stagger bosses, you can swap to the Switch Glaive to do a crazy combo, get massive damage, and maybe even a grapple. The primary element of the Splitstaff will be lightning, aiming to electrify enemies and slow their attacks, and the Ninjutsu with the Splitstaff will allow us to coat our weapons in lightning or wind for maximum elemental effect. When it comes to Omnio magic, we primarily use offensive magic spells since magic scales Omnio magic attack power, netting you some great range damage, which is basically guaranteed damage against bosses if used correctly. When it comes to stats, your stat spread for this build will pivot as you gain more levels to spread your stats out for the minimum requirements on sets and gear. Early on in the game, your first couple levels will be invested into Constitution and Heart for your basic health and key pool. Once you get to a satisfying point at around 20 or 15 of each, pumping points into Magic and Intellect will be your priority. These are the two stats which both the Switch Glaive and Splitstaff scale off of, and both will enhance your Omnio magic. Magic will increase the attack power of offensive Omnio, and Intellect will increase the effect duration of Omnio magic, used as well as increase your key recovery by a good amount. One other stat you may want to level in the early game is skill for some specific sets. With 9 skill, you can use 2 good early game sets for both Ninja and Samurai style, the Wayfarer set and the Iga Jonin sets, which we'll cover later. By the late game, you want to spread out your points to meet set requirements, which will be 18 stamina, 10 strength, and 12 skill. Your main stat will be magic, and you want to invest around 30 points into intellect for maximum value before the soft cap. When it comes to the Switch Glaives you want to use, the early game won't really give you great options, so you should generally just use the highest level Switch Glaive you have. Keep an eye out for weapons imbued with wind, as they can really help apply Blustered alongside your Cyclone ability to make enemies take more key damage. For the set we want in Samurai style, in the early game using the Wayfarer set can get you some decent buffs. You'll have life recovery when executing art attacks with the Switch Glaive, bonus martial arts key damage, an attack bonus buff, and Rising Tide, which empowers the next martial art after you use one. This set takes 8 skill to use, so make sure you invest your points accordingly. For later on in the game, there are only a few sets I recommend, and the best set will involve a Switch Glaive, the Kanemitsu Switch Glaive. This set is called the Swift Silence and Daring Defense. It includes buffs for Spirit Force bonus from wind damage and bonus elemental weapon damage, which both work perfectly with a half wind-based elemental build. Unfortunately, this set is a pretty rare crafting guide drop from the final boss of the Warring States era, which is the first map of the game, so you can farm him and try and get it, but it can be a huge hassle if you aren't significantly higher level than the mission is. There are a few other beginner-friendly sets that you can use as an alternative, however. The Imagawa region gives you a defensive bonus scaling with magic, damage bonuses for familiarity, and life recovery for Amrita absorption. It's an all-around good set for this build, as the buffs are all relevant. The General of Ruin set rewards Deflect, so if you like the Deflect playstyle when you're using the Samurai style, this set has mostly Deflect and guard buffing stats that work in your favor. The Duplicitous General set has 5 pieces of the set that will give you some nice buffs for martial arts, but 6 pieces will give an attack buff for dual swords, which is redundant, so we don't need this one. The main thing you should be looking out for in your samurai armor is to utilize heavy armor, since we have to invest a large amount of stamina to unlock the best Splitstaff set, and we can wear more protective gear without falling down into the C agility category. Moving on to our ninja weapons and armor, in the early game you won't be looking for any specific weapon, just like the samurai style. You'll instead be looking for imbuements, this time anything lightning related to apply Electrify. For the sets we want in ninja style, a great early game set for any ninja user is the Head of the Iga Ninja set. This set grants you less dodge ki consumption, more ninjutsu damage, increased movement speed on ninjutsu hit, occasional free uses of ninjutsu, and higher damage. To use this set, you'll need 9 skill, which also gets you the minimum stats to use the Wayfarer set, making it a pretty good early game combo of sets. Later on, there is one set which is an absolute must for this build, the Devout Practitioner. This is a 7-piece set including full armor, a split staff, and an accessory to grant you some very good buffs, including dodge ki consumption reduced by 25%, enhanced attack and defense when using split staves, and an attack bonus scaling with your magic. These are all fantastic buffs that align particularly well with this build. You do need to spend quite a few points into stamina and skill, 18 and 12 respectively, to use this though, but it's well worth it since it allows you to equip the samurai set I just mentioned at B agility. It's quite easy to get the Devout Practitioner in the second region of the game, unlike the set for samurai style, so I don't have any other recommendations for alternatives. As for special effects you want to look out for specifically on both styles, a wind-imbued Switchglaive and a lightning-imbued Splitstaff are your #1 priorities. After that, some of the especially good effects that you should look out for are as shown on the screen now. For this build, we'll need Kobo Daishi's beads on one of our ninja-style accessory slots, but for the other 3 slots, I recommend any of the following. Divination boards for Omnia Magic Power, prayer beads for life recovery on Amrita Absorption, and white fans for key recovery speed. Moving on to our skills, martial arts, and ninjutsu, this is the most important part of this Nioh 3 build, the attacks and combos which make it work. To start, let's go over the martial arts that you need for Switchglaives and Splitstaffs. Starting off with the Switchglaive, you want to get the following martial arts. All 3 switch stances, Cyclone Wind, Infinite Retribution 2, Kibosh Kicker, and Tempest Flux. The 3 switch stances are your bread and butter for extending combos and finishing enemies off. Switching to low stance will jump you forward, gap closing, and attacking at the same time. Switching to the mid stance will deliver a fast mid-range slash attack, and switching to high stance delivers a massive long-ranged overhead scythe attack, which easily hits enemy weak points and is fantastic as a combo finisher. Cyclone Wind is your main damaging martial art for the majority of trash mobs in the game. Pressing heavy attack after any light attack in mid or high stance will do a whirlwind attack, dealing extra wind damage in a small AoE. I tend to find that this works much better on mid stance as the attack comes out faster, but high stance will deal more damage. Infinite Retribution 2 is not related to the build, but is a nice martial art to have, as you can cheese some bosses with it and deal nice damage against staggered enemies just holding down a button. The Kibosh Kicker is a fantastic martial art for low stance, which can be used all the time for its quick animation and low ki cost. And lastly, the Mystic Art Tempest Flux, which grants you reduced ki consumption for up to 5 stacks by swapping stances mid-attack. Moving on to split staves, we have the following martial arts: Shin Crusher 2, Serpent Sweep Water, Radiant Moon Lightning, Unruly Revolution Wind, Changing Ways, learned by defeating Master Shinran, and Law of Largesse. Shin Crusher is likely the best martial art in this build. This is a martial art that follows up a held quick attack with a held heavy attack. It's an absolutely fantastic martial art for big bosses, as hitting them in the back with Shin Crusher completely shreds their ki bar, making it the best martial art for fighting the big main bosses of the game. For elemental martial arts, we have Unruly Revolution Wind, Radiant Moon Lightning, and Serpent Sweep Water. Unruly Revolution Wind is useful as both an AoE and great source of bluster. Radiant Moon Lightning gets you behind practically any enemy in the game, no matter how big, and helps you inflict Electrify with its transformed art. Serpent Sweep Water isn't as useful in this build as we don't inflict saturation, but it is just a free martial art since it has a unique button activation. Changing Ways is unlocked in the late game from Master Shinran, and it's a great up plus triangle martial art for split stave, dealing tons of damage in a small AoE. For an alternative, before you unlock this, I would recommend Orion's Belt, which does 3 hits of long-range single-target damage. Lastly, the Mystic Art Law of Largesse just makes Shin Crusher and Changing Ways even stronger by adding more hits into these attacks. The next skill tree for us to take a look at is the Ninjutsu tree, which actually comes in very handy for this build. Early on, you'll want the Pinwheel Shuriken and Paralytic Shuriken, as they're simply just good ninjutsu anyone can use. The Pinwheel does great damage from afar, and the Paralytic Shuriken stops bosses in their tracks. Much later on, once you complete the Way of the Ninja Veteran, you should absolutely pick up Tempestuous Calamity and Thundering Calamity. your Wind and Lightning Ninjutsu skills respectively. These two are great for building up status effects and deal a surprisingly large amount of damage even though we don't have much skill invested in our stat spread. We'll also have a skill which applies these elements on our weapons when they're used, which is our next category to cover. With the martial arts and ninjutsu covered, let's go over what skills you want to equip for this build. For common skills, you want Amplification and either Awakened or Volitional Omnio Magic for your Omnio Magic casting. Amplification will extend the duration of your Omnio Magic effect, so you won't need to dump more points into Intelligence, and Awakening/Volitional will make your casting much easier. I personally prefer Awakening for the 1 second faster animations, but Volitional casting works as well. This build will also be using Power Shift and Flexibility to boost your style swapping efficiency. Power Shift will hit nearby enemies when you style switch and restore ki when your ki is low. Flexibility increases the damage of your next attack while swapping. This combination allows you to do huge combos by swapping between Switchglaive and Splitstaves when low on ki. You can even throw in Style Shift Flow if you want to make the style shifting faster. For samurai skills, Favorable Wind is a must, increasing your melee damage against enemies with status ailments, which with this build will be Bluster and Electrify. If you enjoy deflecting in Switchglaive mode, I recommend picking up Counter-Offensive Deflect to boost your damage after deflecting. Other skills which I found useful were Enduring Arts, Oppressive Strength, and Purify Yokai Realm, Heaven, and Earth. Lastly, for ninja skills, I have a few personal favorites. Supreme Shift is my #1 most recommended skill out of any of the ninja skills. It places you right behind the enemy after performing a burst break, which is fantastic for that back attack double damage right after you stagger any enemy. With Shin Crusher, this is an absolute beast and is almost always a guaranteed grapple. Next, Shadowclad is a must for coating your weapons with a ninjutsu-related status effect. Using Thunderous or Tempestuous Calamity with this skill actively coats your weapon with lightning or wind damage, which works great at boosting your status ailment and damage output. And one last skill that synergizes with this build is Patience of the Gods, which will increase the rate at which you build up status ailments by a solid 24%. For soul cores, there are two must-have Yang position cores for this build: the Ibaraki Doji Soul Core and the Kamaitachi Soul Core. Ibaraki Doji is not only a ridiculously powerful summon dealing massive amounts of burst damage, but also has a great stat which provides a Spirit Force bonus when attacking electrified enemies, so you'll have your Guardian Spirit skill up most of the time. For the Yin position, you'll want to set Wind and Lightning attacks alongside any useful buffs or debuffs you find. To throw in a few good ones out there, here is a quick list of recommendations on the screen. When it comes to Guardian Spirits, you want to look for ones that give you stats for anything lightning or wind related, as well as martial arts or omnio magic. One of the best Spirit Guardians for this build is unfortunately the final Spirit Guardian of the game, so the main best Spirit Guardians for this build will be Guhin for Samurai style and Shamichoro for Ninja style. Guhin will generally give you useful stats which are helpful in combat, like martial art ki reduction, damage reduction, and bonus damage against winded enemies. Shamichoro will give you faster movement on evading, faster ki recovery when we're hit by Omnio Magic, status enhancement duration, and a buff to all of our lightning damage. Both Guardian Spirit skills are also great. You'll mostly be using Guhin's Guardian Spirit skill when you run out of ki after doing long combo strings, which is a multi-hit wind slashing attack. Shamichuro's skill is a distance closer which pulls you towards enemies while dealing lightning damage. There is another option for Samurai style, which is Kongo Jishi. The Spirit Guardian has a boost to your wind damage, which we deal a lot of, but I personally chose Guhin over him thanks to the amazing spirit skill that Guhin has. For titles, there are a few specific bonuses that are key for this build. Under the Samurai titles, melee attack ki consumption is a must, then martial arts ki damage secondary. For Ninja, melee attack ki consumption is a priority as well, and under Tactics, getting Omnio Magic power then ki recovery speed are great, and in Subjugation, make sure to prioritize elemental damage to get a boost to all elemental damage we deal with this build. The rest of the titles can be done as you see fit, but these are the key bonuses for this build. Final tips. Overall, there's a ton to learn with this build. It's one that gives you a huge amount of options in combat so that you can adapt to anything, be that duelers, huge yokai monsters, or ranged enemies. I do have a few starter combos with the Switchglaive I want to highlight so you can get started without feeling too overwhelmed. My personal go-to combo against basically any mob using Switchglaive is the following: low stance light attacks followed by Kibosh Kicker, into mid stance swap and light attacks followed by high stance swap into Cyclone if not already dead. When you run out of ki after this combo, always use Guhin's Guardian Spirit skill to deal damage while restoring your ki meter. For stronger enemies with a weak point on their head, any attack will work following into a high stance swap will typically get it and stagger them, allowing you to get some big damage with either Cyclone or a Splitstaff swap. When fighting big yokai enemies like bosses, make sure to use the Splitstaff and Shin Crusher to absolutely shred their ki meter for an easy kill. Remember to use Radiant Moon Lightning or Mist to try to get behind these enemies for that juicy back attack damage. For dueler type enemies, Unruly Revolution Wind is a godsend since enemies won't deflect it and it deals a good amount of ki damage. You'll also want to constantly remind yourself of status effects, trying to have both Electrify and Bluster active on any enemy at all times, and using your Lightning and Wind Ninjutsu to apply the status effect to your weapons is a great way to do so. The Ninjutsu typically recharge quite fast as well, so make sure you reapply their status effects whenever you can. As for magic, make sure to use your Ibaraki Doji Lightning Summon for huge burst AoE damage against bosses, and Kamaitachi Wind Summon for large crowds of mobs. Whatever Omnia magics you've slotted, you can use them while enemies are staggered before a grapple, or mid-combat when you feel safe to do so. Now that's a lot to remember, but once you play around with the build enough and start to really understand the combat with everything clicking, I guarantee you'll be an absolute monster at this game. So that wraps up my Split-Glaive Arcanist build guide. If you want to find out where to acquire any specific weapons or skills, you can be sure to check out the wiki. And if you have any tips or suggestions, feel free to leave them in the comments below.